James Walker had always been a man of quiet strength. Standing tall and steady, he had spent years serving as a tomb guard at Arlington National Cemetery. Every day, rain or shine, he performed his duties with precision and respect, knowing that his role carried the weight of honoring the brave men and women who had given everything for their country. James loved his job. It gave him purpose, pride, and a sense of calm discipline that many people admired from afar, even if they never saw it up close. On this particular afternoon, James decided to visit a local luxury car dealership. It was not something he did often. He had been saving carefully for months, cutting small luxuries from his own life and putting aside every extra dollar he could. Owning a high-end car was never about showing off for him. It was about rewarding himself for years of hard work, discipline, and service. It was something that would quietly bring him joy, a small personal victory that would remind him he could achieve his dreams through patience and effort. When he arrived at the dealership, James felt a familiar sense of calm focus. He wore simple clothes, clean, neat, but modest. He didn't wear flashy jewelry or designer shoes. To him, his service as a tomb guard was enough distinction, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence that comes from years of unwavering discipline. However, the staff at the dealership saw something very different. They were used to wealthy, flashy clients who drove expensive cars and made large purchases without hesitation. James's modest appearance seemed unusual to them, and some of them decided to make assumptions without a second thought. The moment James walked into the showroom, one of the salespeople approached him with a smirk. "Can I help you, sir? Are you just browsing?" the man asked, his tone dripping with subtle condescension. James smiled politely and explained that he was interested in learning more about a specific model, one he had admired for some time. He spoke clearly, confidently, and respectfully, but his calm demeanor seemed to amuse the staff more than it impressed them. As he moved through the rows of shiny cars, another salesperson whispered to a colleague, loud enough for James to hear, "I don't think someone like him can afford anything here." James felt a tight knot of discomfort in his chest. He had been judged before in life, but not often so openly and without cause. He continued walking, ignoring the whispers, but inside he could feel the sting of humiliation. Then came the moment he would never forget. One of the salespeople, noticing James's tomb guard badge, leaned in and made a mocking comment. "Oh, you're one of those guards? I guess you're here for a test drive on our imaginary budget, huh?" He laughed, and a few others joined in, smirking and whispering. The words cut deeper than any criticism James had received in his military training. He had served his country honorably, and here, in a place meant for dreams and possibilities, he was being treated like a joke. James paused for a moment. His mind raced, and a mix of emotions surged through him. There was anger, yes, but there was also disbelief, sadness, and a strong sense of injustice. He felt humiliated, but he also knew that reacting in anger would only confirm the shallow assumptions of the salespeople. He remembered the lessons of his tomb guard training: control, patience, and dignity under pressure. So he did what he always did. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and remained silent. Instead of responding, James simply thanked them politely and quietly left the showroom. He didn't storm out or make a scene. He didn't shout or demand an apology. He just walked away, each step heavy with disappointment but his head held high. Outside, the sun shone on the cars lined up like jewels in the lot, reflecting light off their polished surfaces. James looked at them, and for a brief moment he felt a pang of frustration at how unfair the world could be. Walking to his car, he replayed the encounter in his mind. He thought about how easily people judge others based on appearance, without knowing their story or the struggles they had endured. He remembered the families he honored daily at Arlington, the sacrifices he had witnessed, and the courage he had learned to carry quietly. And he realized that one day he would have the chance to show these salespeople, and maybe the world, what true character really meant. That evening, James returned home with a mix of feelings. Part of him was embarrassed, feeling the sting of being underestimated and mocked. Another part of him felt a quiet spark of determination. He knew that humiliation was only temporary if he chose to rise above it. He remembered the discipline that had guided him through years of military service and his time as a tomb guard. That same discipline could guide him here, in his personal life, toward achieving the dream he had worked so hard to reach. James spent the next few days reflecting on the encounter. He wrote down notes about what had happened and thought carefully about how he could prepare for the future. He considered what had gone wrong, not in his own actions but in the way he had been perceived. He realized that appearances often mislead people, and that knowledge, confidence, and preparation could help him break through those shallow judgments. He also sought advice from friends and colleagues, many of whom had faced similar moments of unfair treatment. They reminded him that patience and careful planning were just as important in life as courage and discipline had been in his military training. They encouraged him to channel his feelings into something productive, to learn from the experience, and to come back stronger and wiser. James knew the road ahead would require patience, just as his tomb guard duties required hours of careful, silent practice. He began setting goals, not just financial ones for the car he wanted, but personal goals for confidence, knowledge, and preparation. He studied more about luxury vehicles, learning the features, pricing, and financing options. He practiced how he would interact with staff, how he would present himself, and how he would respond to any further doubts or judgments. Evenings were spent imagining his return to the dealership, picturing the scene in his mind and refining his approach. Each scenario strengthened his resolve. He reminded himself that dignity was not about winning arguments or proving people wrong on the spot. It was about preparation, patience, and the quiet power of competence. In the weeks that followed, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. The embarrassment of that first visit became fuel for his determination. He no longer saw the salespeople's judgment as a defeat, but as a challenge to rise above, to turn humiliation into motivation. Each day he grew more confident in himself, knowing that the real victory would come not from revenge, but from achieving his goal with integrity and calm. By the time he returned to the dealership months later, James was ready, not just with the money he had saved, but with the confidence, knowledge, and presence that would command respect. The sting of the past visit had been transformed into a quiet fire, a drive to prove, above all else, that character and preparation always speak louder than assumptions and mockery. After the humiliating experience at the dealership, James Walker returned home feeling a mixture of frustration and determination. That day had been tough. He had been mocked for something he had earned through discipline, respect, and hard work. Yet, as he sat quietly in his small apartment, he realized that dwelling on shame would accomplish nothing. He needed a plan. He needed to turn that moment of embarrassment into an opportunity to grow, to improve, and to prove to himself more than anyone else that he was capable of achieving his goals. James began by reflecting on what had happened. He replayed the encounter in his mind, examining every word, every glance, and every subtle gesture. He noticed that his modest appearance had led the staff to underestimate him. They assumed he couldn't afford a luxury car. They thought he didn't belong in a place designed for wealthy clients. James understood that these judgments were shallow, but he also realized they were predictable. People often judge others by what they see, not by what they know. That knowledge became the foundation of his plan. He decided that when he returned to the dealership, he would be fully prepared. Not just financially, but intellectually and emotionally. He started by learning everything he could about the cars he wanted. He spent hours reading brochures, watching reviews, and comparing models. He studied features, prices, and financing options. He wanted to speak with authority, so that no one could question his understanding or his seriousness. Knowledge, he knew, could command respect in a way that appearances never could. Next, James focused on his finances. He had been saving diligently, but he realized that to succeed he needed a clear plan. He reviewed his budget, adjusted his spending, and calculated exactly how much he could afford. He explored loan options, financing deals, and dealership incentives. By the time he was ready, he knew his numbers inside out. This gave him a quiet confidence. He would not be caught off guard, and he would not allow anyone to make him feel inadequate. But James understood that preparation wasn't only about money and knowledge. He needed to work on his presence, his demeanor, and his confidence. He practiced how he would enter the dealership, how he would greet the staff, and how he would respond if anyone tried to mock him again. He visualized every detail, the tone of his voice, the calmness in his gestures, the polite but firm way he would assert himself. This was not about confrontation. It was about showing respect and expecting it in return. James also drew strength from his life as a tomb guard. Years of standing in silence under the sun and rain had taught him patience and endurance. He remembered the families who visited Arlington, the solemn faces of those honoring lost loved ones, and the discipline it took to perform his duties flawlessly. He realized that the same qualities could help him in this new challenge. Patience, calmness, and resilience were powerful tools, whether guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier or walking into a room full of judgment. Friends and colleagues noticed the change in James. He had always been disciplined, but now there was a quiet determination in his eyes that had not been there before. They encouraged him, offering advice and support. Some shared their own experiences of being underestimated and judged unfairly. James listened carefully, taking mental notes about what worked and what didn't. Every story reinforced his belief that setbacks were not the end. They were lessons. In the weeks that followed, James created a detailed plan. He set goals, timelines, and steps to prepare for his return. Each day he worked a little harder, learned a little more, and practiced a little longer. He reminded himself that success was not about rushing or forcing results. It was about consistent effort, discipline, and persistence. This mindset, he knew, had already carried him through the most challenging moments of his life. James also focused on his mindset. He knew that anger or resentment would not help him. Those emotions could cloud judgment and weaken his resolve. Instead, he cultivated calm confidence. He practiced deep breathing, visualization, and positive self-talk. He imagined himself walking into the dealership, greeted respectfully and handling every question and challenge with grace. Each mental rehearsal strengthened his belief that he could succeed. Meanwhile, he continued his daily duties at Arlington with the same dedication as always. The contrast between the serenity of his work and the challenge he faced at the dealership gave him perspective. Serving others, honoring the fallen, and standing with unwavering discipline reminded him of his inner strength. The experience at the dealership was temporary, but the character he had built over the years was permanent. As his preparation progressed, James began to feel a growing sense of excitement. What had once been a source of embarrassment became a challenge he looked forward to. He wasn't motivated by revenge or anger, but by the desire to prove to himself what he was capable of achieving. Every day brought him closer to his goal, and every small success reinforced his determination. James also paid attention to his appearance and communication style. He knew that first impressions mattered in this environment. He chose clothes that were simple yet polished, showing respect for himself and others without being flashy. He practiced speaking clearly and confidently, making sure that his tone conveyed both authority and friendliness. Every detail mattered, from the way he shook hands to the way he listened carefully to questions. He even studied the dealership itself. He learned about the staff, the types of clients they served, and the culture of the showroom. This knowledge allowed him to anticipate questions, understand their expectations, and navigate interactions with ease. By the time he was ready to return, James knew that he would enter the room fully prepared, not just to purchase a car, but to demonstrate the qualities that truly defined him: intelligence, patience, and dignity. Months of preparation passed, and James felt ready. He had transformed his humiliation into fuel for growth. He had learned, practiced, and strengthened himself in ways he never imagined. The sting of being mocked at the dealership no longer felt like a burden. It was a stepping stone. He was ready to return, not with anger, but with quiet confidence in the knowledge that he had earned every step of this journey through hard work, preparation, and resilience. Finally, the day came. James looked at himself in the mirror, straightened his clothes, and took a deep breath. He carried with him not only the money he had saved, but also the skills, knowledge, and mindset he had built over months of effort. He remembered the lessons from his life as a tomb guard: patience, calm, and unwavering focus. As he drove toward the dealership, he felt a sense of anticipation that was calm but powerful. This was not just about buying a car. It was about showing the world and himself that determination and preparation can transform any setback into a triumph. The day James Walker had been preparing for finally arrived. Months of careful planning, saving, learning, and practicing had led to this moment. As he approached the dealership, he felt a quiet sense of confidence that he had never felt before. The nerves were there, of course, but they were tempered by months of preparation and self-discipline. This was the moment to put all his effort to the test, not just to buy a car, but to demonstrate the strength of his character and the power of patience and perseverance. Walking through the dealership doors, James was greeted with the familiar sound of polished floors and the subtle hum of luxury vehicles. He noticed some of the same staff members who had mocked him months earlier. They looked at him with surprise, perhaps even curiosity. James remained calm. He smiled politely, greeted them with respect, and made his way toward the model he had studied so meticulously. Every movement, every gesture conveyed quiet confidence. He was no longer a visitor who felt out of place. He was someone who knew exactly what he wanted and how to achieve it. The same salesperson who had mocked him the first time approached. His expression shifted from casual amusement to mild surprise, then to something else, perhaps a hint of respect. James greeted him warmly, maintaining eye contact and speaking clearly. The staff could sense a change. This was not the same man they had underestimated months ago. James spoke knowledgeably about the car, its features, financing options, and even the dealership's own policies. Every question was met with a calm, confident answer. The staff realized quickly that they were dealing with someone prepared, disciplined, and serious. The salesperson who had mocked him tried to make a joke again, testing him with a sly comment about whether he really belonged in the showroom. James paused for a moment, smiled politely, and responded with a short, confident explanation of his financial planning and research. There was no anger, no need to justify himself beyond the facts. His calm demeanor and well-prepared answers left the staff silent for a moment. The very qualities that had been ridiculed months before, humility, quiet discipline, and dedication, now became a source of admiration. As James moved through the negotiation process, he demonstrated patience and attention to detail. He asked questions about financing, warranties, and service options. He compared different models with careful reasoning, making clear that his decision would be thoughtful, not impulsive. Every step reinforced his authority and competence. The staff, once dismissive, began to treat him with respect, listening carefully to his questions and acknowledging his knowledge. The tables had turned completely. Other customers in the showroom began to notice the transformation as well. James, who had once seemed out of place, now commanded attention not through flashy displays but through quiet confidence, preparation, and integrity. It was a subtle but powerful lesson in character. The people who had laughed at him before could see that assumptions based on appearance were often wrong. Respect, they realized, was earned through knowledge, patience, and composure, not superficial impressions. Finally, after careful discussion and negotiation, James agreed on a deal for the car he had dreamed of. The dealership staff congratulated him, some even offering personal compliments on how well he had handled himself. James felt a sense of quiet triumph. It wasn't just the car he had earned, it was the validation that hard work, discipline, and patience could overcome judgment, humiliation, and doubt. He had transformed a painful experience into a moment of victory, proving to himself that setbacks were opportunities in disguise. As he drove off the lot in his new car, James felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that went far beyond material gain. He had faced humiliation, reflected on it, prepared himself, and returned stronger and wiser. The experience taught him valuable lessons about resilience, self-respect, and the importance of preparation. He understood more than ever that true strength is quiet and steadfast, not loud or aggressive. In the weeks that followed, James shared his story with friends, colleagues, and even strangers who were inspired by his journey. He emphasized that setbacks are part of life, and how we respond to them defines us far more than the initial challenges themselves. His story became an example of perseverance, patience, and dignity, showing that anyone can turn moments of shame or failure into opportunities for growth and success. James continued his work as a tomb guard with renewed energy and pride. His experience at the dealership reminded him that the values he practiced daily, discipline, patience, integrity, were not just for ceremonial duty, but for life. Whether standing silently at Arlington National Cemetery or walking confidently into a challenging situation, he had learned to carry himself with calm authority, knowing that true respect comes from action, not assumptions. Even the dealership staff, once doubtful and mocking, came to respect him not only as a customer, but as a person of integrity and determination. James's story served as a quiet reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that humility, preparation, and patience are powerful tools for success in any situation. He had faced judgment and ridicule, but he had responded with character, transforming humiliation into triumph. In the end, James's journey was about more than just a car. It was about proving to himself that his hard work, discipline, and integrity mattered. It was about showing that setbacks are temporary, but the lessons we take from them are lasting. And it was about inspiring others to remain patient, stay prepared, and believe in themselves, even when the world seems to doubt them. James Walker's comeback at the dealership became a story people shared, not because of the car he purchased, but because of the quiet strength, resilience, and dignity he displayed. It was a reminder that anyone, regardless of how they are judged, can rise above mockery and misunderstanding with patience, preparation, and unwavering self-respect. That day, as James parked his new car and walked toward his home, he reflected on the journey. The embarrassment he had once felt was replaced by pride, and the lessons learned were far more valuable than any material reward. He understood that life's challenges are opportunities to grow, and that perseverance, character, and dignity can turn any moment of shame into a lasting story of triumph and inspiration.